The sword was meant for his heart, but she stepped between them without thinking. Her hands were empty, her dress was torn, and her life meant nothing to the men who surrounded them. Yet she did not move. She did not scream. She simply stood there, a fragile wall of bone and courage, and dared the assassin to strike her instead. Behind her, the Duke of Ashworth's only son lay bleeding in the mud, barely conscious, and utterly unaware that a kitchen maid had just saved his life. She had no idea that this single moment would change everything. She had no idea that the man she protected was the most dangerous nobleman in all of England. And she certainly had no idea that he would spend the next year of his life trying to discover who she was, why she saved him, and how she managed to walk away without even giving him her name. The night of the ambush was cold and wet, the kind of English autumn that seeped into your bones and made you forget what warmth felt like. Lady Eleanor Vance had been running for her life for 3 days, though she had stopped counting the hours somewhere between the second time she crossed the river and the moment she realized her shoes had completely fallen apart. She was no longer a lady, not really. Her father had died 2 months ago, leaving behind nothing but debts and a crumbling estate that had been sold to a distant cousin she had never met. Her mother had followed him to the grave within a fortnight, unable to bear the shame of their fall from grace. And Eleanor, at 22, had found herself utterly alone in a world that had no use for penniless noblewomen. She had taken work where she could find it, which was how she ended up as a kitchen maid at Thornwood Manor, the sprawling country estate of the Duke of Ashworth. It was a humbling position for a woman who had once danced at balls and worn silk gowns. But Eleanor was not proud. She was practical, she was determined, and she was desperate enough to scrub pots and peel vegetables if it meant she could keep a roof over her head. But she had not expected the ambush. She had not expected to find herself on a dark country road, returning from delivering a message to the village apothecary, when a carriage came thundering past her, its horses wild-eyed and terrified. The carriage had crashed into a tree, the driver thrown from his seat, and the horses had bolted into the night, leaving behind a chaos of broken wood and tangled reins. And then the men had come, 4 of them, armed with swords and knives, their faces hidden beneath scarves and hats. They had descended upon the wreckage like wolves upon a wounded stag, and Eleanor had hidden behind a nearby hedge, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they would hear it. She watched as they dragged a man from the carriage. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark greatcoat that had once been expensive but was now torn and stained with blood. He was barely conscious, his head lolling to the side, his hands bound behind his back. She could not see his face clearly in the darkness, but she could see that he was injured, badly injured. One of the men raised a sword. "The Duke's son," he snarled. "Cut him down. We'll make it look like an accident." Eleanor did not think. She did not weigh the consequences. She did not calculate the risk to her own life. She simply moved. She burst from behind the hedge, her arms outstretched, her voice sharp and commanding, in a way that surprised even her. "Stop!" The men froze. 4 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her, and for a moment, no one moved. The man with the sword hesitated, his blade suspended in the air, inches from the downed nobleman's chest. Eleanor stepped forward, positioning herself directly between the assassin and his target. She had no weapons. She had no plan. She had only the desperate conviction that she could not let this happen. "Step aside, girl," the man with the sword growled, "unless you want to die with him." Eleanor swallowed, her throat dry, but she did not move. "You will not touch him." The man laughed, a cruel sound that echoed through the dark woods. "You are nothing, a servant, a nobody. What makes you think you can stop us?" "Kill me if you must," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling but steady enough. "But I will not let you kill him." There was something in her voice, something that made the men pause. They looked at each other, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Perhaps they had been warned to expect an easy target, a single nobleman without protection. Perhaps they had not anticipated a witness, a woman who was not afraid to die for a man she did not even know. Then someone shouted from the road ahead, a distant voice calling out in alarm. The men exchanged glances, muttered curses, and then they were gone, disappearing into the trees like shadows swallowed by the darkness. Eleanor collapsed to her knees, her body shaking uncontrollably. The man she had saved lay unconscious beside her, his face pale and bloodied. She should have left him. She should have run back to Thornwood Manor and pretended she had seen nothing, but she did not. She knelt beside him, tore a strip of fabric from her apron, and pressed it against the wound on his head, trying to stop the bleeding. She stayed with him until help arrived, a farmer and his son who had heard the commotion and come to investigate. They helped her lift the nobleman into their cart and carried him to the village doctor. Eleanor gave her name as Jane Smith, a kitchen maid from Thornwood, and then she slipped away into the night, disappearing before anyone could ask her any more questions. She had saved a man's life, but she had also made herself a target. The man she had saved was William Blackwood, the Marquess of Kensington, and the only son of the Duke of Ashworth. He was 28 years old, a war hero who had returned from the Napoleonic campaigns with a chest full of medals and a heart full of ghosts. He had seen things in battle that no man should ever see, had held dying soldiers in his arms and watched comrades fall beside him. He had returned to England expecting peace, expecting to take up his duties as heir to one of the most powerful dukedoms in the country. But instead of peace, he had found a different kind of battlefield. His father, the Duke of Ashworth, was a cold, calculating man who valued reputation above all else. He had been grooming William for power since the boy could walk, and he had little patience for his son's reluctance to embrace his role. William was haunted, withdrawn, and deeply unwilling to marry the woman his father had chosen for him, Lady Margaret Sinclair, the daughter of the Earl of Wrexham, a beautiful and ambitious noblewoman who had made it clear that she intended to be the next Duchess of Ashworth. William had refused the match, angering his father and earning himself an enemy in Lady Margaret, who saw his rejection as the ultimate insult to her pride. She was a woman used to getting what she wanted, and she did not take rejection well. She had set out to destroy William's reputation, spreading whispers about his unstable temperament, his violent outbursts, and his unwillingness to fulfill his duties as the future duke. Rumors that the assassin who had almost killed William might have been connected to her network had never been proven, but William suspected her involvement. It was 3 weeks before William woke from the fever that had taken hold after his injury. He was weak, his head bandaged, and he could barely remember the details of the attack. But there was one thing he remembered with absolute clarity: a woman who had stood before a sword to protect him, a woman with fierce eyes and a voice that had commanded even his attackers to stop. He remembered her face, though it was hazy and blurred by pain and darkness. He remembered the way she had positioned herself between him and death, with nothing but courage and conviction. And he remembered the way she had vanished after the rescue, leaving him with only the fading image of her features and the single name she had given, Jane Smith. He immediately began searching for her. "Find her," he commanded his steward, a man named Geoffrey Hastings, who had served the Blackwood family for 30 years. She called herself Jane Smith, a kitchen maid from Thornwood Manor. "Find her and bring her to me." But Geoffrey returned with troubling news. "There is no Jane Smith at Thornwood Manor, my lord. I questioned every servant. No one by that name works in the kitchens or anywhere else." William frowned. It was possible she had lied about her name, of course. But why? A servant who saved a nobleman's life would expect a reward, even if it was only a few coins and a word of thanks. Yet she had disappeared without asking for anything. He refused to give up. He visited Thornwood Manor himself, questioned the housekeeper, the cook, the footman, and the maids. He offered a reward of £50 to anyone who could identify the woman who had saved him. But no one stepped forward. No one seemed to remember the woman with the fierce eyes and the torn dress. "She must not be from this village," his friend and confidant, Captain James Whittaker, observed. "Perhaps she was passing through, a traveler, a woman fleeing someone or something." "Perhaps," William agreed, but he did not believe it. There was something about her, something that tugged at his memory, something that made him certain he had seen her before. He searched for her for 6 months. He traveled to neighboring villages, posting notices and offering rewards. He questioned everyone he met, describing her as best he could, but no one knew the woman he described. And then, in the depths of a harsh winter, he found her. It was a chance encounter, the kind that seemed orchestrated by fate itself. William had been invited to a gathering at Thornwood Manor, a Christmas ball hosted by the Earl of Ellington, one of his father's closest allies. He had not wanted to attend. He still had no patience for the gossips and sycophants who populated the aristocracy. But his father had insisted, and William had learned that it was easier to give in than to fight. The ballroom was crowded with men in tailcoats, and women in jewels and silk, and William stood near the far wall, nursing a glass of wine, and wishing he were anywhere else. Captain Whittaker was nearby, chatting with a young lady who seemed utterly charmed by his tales of battle. William watched the dancers spin and turn, the light of 100 candles reflecting off their gowns and shoes. And then he saw her. She was standing near the refreshment table, her head bowed, her shoulders rigid. She was dressed in a simple gray dress, far too plain for such a gathering, and she was carrying a silver tray laden with glasses of punch. She was a servant, clearly. But when she looked up, meeting his gaze across the crowded room, William felt the breath leave his lungs. It was her, the woman from the road, the woman who had saved his life. He moved before he could think, walking swiftly through the crowd, ignoring the curious stares and whispered questions. He reached her just as she was about to turn away, his hand catching her elbow and stopping her gently. "Wait," he said, his voice low and intense. "Please, I know you." The woman froze. Her eyes, a striking shade of gray, widened in alarm. She tried to pull away, but he held her arm firmly, gently. "You saved me," he continued. On the road, 6 months ago. You stood before a sword to protect me. I have been searching for you ever since. She shook her head, her face pale. You are mistaken, my lord. I am nothing but a servant. I have never seen you before in my life. Liar, he said, but there was no anger in his voice. Only a desperate certainty. I remember your eyes. I have dreamed of them for 6 months. Please, I only wish to thank you. She looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape, but the crowd was thick, and the other servants were busy attending to the guests. She was trapped. The woman you are looking for is dead, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She died that night. Please, let me go. William's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The woman opened her mouth, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the din of the ballroom. Ah, William, I wondered where you had gone. Lady Margaret Sinclair appeared at his side, her smile sharp and predatory. She was dressed in a gown of deep crimson silk, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. She took his arm possessively, pulling him away from the servant woman. You should not be mingling with the help, dearest, she murmured, loud enough for the woman to hear. It is simply not done. William stiffened, his jaw tightening, but he could not argue with her publicly, not without causing a scene. The servant woman used the distraction to slip away, disappearing into the crowd like a ghost. William watched her go, his heart racing. She had recognized him, she had lied to him, and she was clearly afraid of something or someone. He knew he had to find her again. It took him a week to track her down. Captain Whitaker, who was a far better investigator than William would ever be, discovered that the woman's real name was Lady Eleanor Vance, the daughter of a deceased baron who had lost everything after her father's death. She had been working at Thornwood Manor for nearly a year, in the kitchens, and had been moved to the main house as a temporary maid for the Christmas ball. She is not what she appears, Whitaker reported. She was raised as a lady. She was educated, she can read and write in 3 languages, and she has connections to several prominent families. But her father's debts ruined them, and she has been forced into service. William was stunned. A lady. The woman who had saved his life was a lady, a woman who had once moved in the same circles as him, who had danced at the same balls and attended the same gatherings, and now she was peeling potatoes and scrubbing floors for a living. Bring her to me, he commanded. I do not care what it takes. I need to speak with her. But when Whitaker tried to find Eleanor, she had vanished. She had quit her position at Thornwood Manor, leaving behind only a brief note to the housekeeper, and disappeared into the night. No one knew where she had gone. No one knew why she had left. William was consumed by the mystery. He spent sleepless nights trying to piece together the puzzle. Why had she lied about her name? Why had she fled? Why was she so determined to avoid him? And then, 4 days after her disappearance, a letter arrived at Ashworth House. It was addressed to William, and it was written in an elegant, educated hand. My lord, I know you have been searching for me. I know you have questions, but I beg you, please, let this matter rest. The woman who saved you is not the woman you think she is. She is dangerous. She has secrets that could destroy you and everyone you love. Please, do not seek me out. Do not try to find me. It is better for both of us if I remain a stranger. Yours in deepest regret, Eleanor Vance. William read the letter 3 times. a strange ache forming in his chest. She was afraid, not for herself, for him. She believed that her secrets could harm him. She believed that she was dangerous. He wrote back immediately, sending a reply to the address she had written on the letter. He told her that he did not care about her secrets. He told her that she had saved his life, and he would be forever grateful. And he told her that he would not stop looking for her until he found her. The reply came a week later, but it was not from Eleanor. It was from Lady Margaret Sinclair, and it was filled with malice. My dear William, I am writing to inform you of a rather interesting discovery. It seems that the woman you have been searching for, the lovely Lady Eleanor Vance, has a rather sordid past. You see, her father was not merely in debt. He was a traitor. He was accused of spying for the French during the war, and though he was never formally charged, the evidence against him was damning. The entire family was disgraced, and Eleanor herself was rumored to be involved in the plot. She is a traitor's daughter, William, a woman who cannot be trusted, and if you continue to associate with her, you will bring ruin upon yourself and your family. I am telling you this out of love, dearest. I would hate to see you destroy yourself for a woman who is not worthy of you. Yours affectionately, Margaret. William felt the blood drain from his face. A traitor's daughter. It was a devastating accusation, one that could ruin Eleanor's reputation forever. But as he read the letter again, something did not feel right. Margaret was known for her manipulations. She had tried to destroy him when he had refused to marry her. This could easily be another attempt to ruin someone she saw as a rival. He decided to investigate further, and what he discovered would change everything. Eleanor's father had indeed been accused of spying for the French, but the evidence had been fabricated. The real traitor was Eleanor's uncle, a man named Sir Reginald Vance, who had used his brother's reputation to cover his own crimes. Eleanor's father had been innocent, but he had taken the blame to protect his family. Eleanor had known the truth all along, and she had been hiding from her uncle ever since. But when she had returned to England after her father's death, she had been recognized by a member of her uncle's network. The attempt on William's life had not been a random attack. It had been an assassination ordered by Sir Reginald, who had learned that William was investigating the treason case on behalf of the government. Eleanor had stumbled into a plot far bigger than she had realized, and by saving William, she had made herself an enemy of her uncle's network. The revelation sent William into a storm of emotion. The woman he had been searching for was not only a lady, she was a woman who had been living in hiding for years. A woman who had sacrificed everything to protect her father's memory. A woman who had risked her life to save a stranger from the same people who had destroyed her family. He had to find her, and he had to protect her. William's search took him to a small cottage in the village of Hatherley, 30 miles from London. It was a humble place, barely more than a hovel, with a thatched roof and a garden overgrown with weeds. But when he knocked on the door and it opened, Eleanor Vance stood before him. She looked different from the woman he had seen at the ball. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and her clothes were worn and threadbare. But her eyes were the same, those fierce gray eyes that had stared down assassins without flinching. She took one look at him and tried to close the door. "Please," he said, putting his hand against the wood. "I need to speak with you. I know everything. I know about your father. I know about your uncle. I know you are in danger." She froze, her hand trembling on the doorframe. How do you know about my uncle? I have my sources, he replied. I also know that the assassination attempt on my life was connected to your uncle's network. He tried to kill me because I was investigating him, but he failed. Because of you. You saved my life. Eleanor stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. I did not know who you were, she whispered. I did not know you were investigating my uncle. I just saw a man about to die, and I could not let him. I could not let anyone die in my presence. I have seen too much death already. William stepped forward, taking her hands in his. You are the bravest woman I have ever known, he said, his voice filled with emotion. You are not dangerous. You are not a traitor's daughter. You are a woman of extraordinary courage, and I will not let you face this alone. But Eleanor pulled away, shaking her head. You do not understand. My uncle knows I am alive. He knows I helped you. He will not stop until he has killed me. I have been running for years, and I am so tired. I cannot keep running forever. Then stop running, William said firmly. Stay with me. Let me protect you. Eleanor looked at him, her expression torn between hope and disbelief. I cannot, she said. If I stay with you, I will put you in danger. I will ruin you. I do not care, William replied. I would rather be ruined by you than safe with anyone else. For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. Her tears spilled over, running down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. And then, from the shadows of the cottage, a figure stepped forward. It was Lady Margaret Sinclair, her face twisted in a cruel smile. How touching, she said. The hero and the heroine, declaring their love. But I am afraid this little fairy tale is about to end quite badly. William whirled around, pulling Eleanor behind him. What are you doing here? Margaret held up a letter. I have proof that Eleanor's uncle has been plotting against the crown, and I have proof that Eleanor has been complicit. I am going to take her to the magistrate, and you are going to watch her hang. Eleanor gasped, her face going pale. That is a lie. I have never been complicit. Try telling that to a judge, Margaret sneered. I have documents. I have witnesses. I have everything I need to destroy you. William stepped forward, his eyes blazing. If you try to harm her, I will destroy you, Margaret. I swear it. You cannot destroy me, William, Margaret replied, laughing. I am the daughter of an earl. I am untouchable. But this woman, this servant, she is nothing. She will hang, and you will watch. William knew he had to act fast. He had to prove Margaret's accusations were false. He had to find evidence that would clear Eleanor's name. He had to confront her uncle and expose the truth. But time was running out. That night, William and Captain Whitaker devised a plan. They would confront Sir Reginald Vance at his country estate, where he was rumored to be hiding. They would demand answers, and they would force him to confess. The journey to the estate was treacherous, a dark ride through rain-soaked forests and winding roads. But William did not falter. He was driven by a single purpose, to save the woman he loved. When they arrived at the estate, they found Sir Reginald in his study, surrounded by papers and ledgers. He was a thin, nervous man, with nervous eyes that darted around the room. When he saw William, he paled visibly. "Lord Kensington," he stammered. "What an honor." I was not expecting you." "I am not here for pleasantries," William said coldly. "I am here about Eleanor Vance, your niece. I know you framed her father for treason. I know you ordered the assassination attempt on my life. And I know you have been hiding from the authorities for years. It is time for you to face the truth." Sir Reginald tried to deny it, but William had brought evidence. He had brought witness statements from former servants who had seen Sir Reginald meeting with French spies. He had brought letters that proved Sir Reginald had been involved in the plot. The evidence was overwhelming. Sir Reginald broke down, confessing everything. He had framed his brother to protect himself. He had ordered the assassination attempt to silence William, and he had been manipulating events for years, all to protect his own guilty secrets. William returned to London with Sir Reginald's confession, a document signed and sealed, ready to present to the magistrate. He rushed to the courthouse, where Eleanor was being held in a cell, awaiting her trial. He burst into the courtroom just as the judge was about to deliver his verdict. He handed over the confession, explaining the truth in a voice that echoed through the chamber. The judge read the confession, his face turning from skepticism to shock. Eleanor was declared innocent. Sir Reginald was arrested for high treason, and Margaret's scheme fell apart completely, her reputation destroyed by her own manipulations. Eleanor was released from the courthouse, her body shaking with relief. William was waiting for her, his arms open. She ran to him, burying her face in his chest, her tears soaking through his coat. "I thought I was going to die," she sobbed. "I would never have let that happen," he whispered. "I love you, Eleanor. I think I have loved you since the moment you stepped in front of that sword. I love your courage. I love your strength. I love everything about you." Eleanor looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen but shining with joy. "I love you too," she said. "I think I fell in love with you the moment you spoke to me at the ball, when you looked at me as if I were the only person in the world." William smiled, a smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "I know I am not the easiest man to love. I am guarded. I am haunted. But I promise I will spend the rest of my life making you happy." Eleanor nodded, her smile so wide it hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you. I have been waiting for someone to see me for who I truly am." "And you did. You saw me when I was invisible, and you loved me anyway." They were married 3 weeks later, in a quiet ceremony at Ashworth House. The Duke of Ashworth, who had finally learned to accept his son's choices, gave his blessing. Captain Whitaker was William's best man, and Eleanor wore a gown of ivory silk, her hair adorned with fresh flowers. Lady Margaret Sinclair was not invited. She had retreated to the countryside, her ambitions crushed, her reputation shattered by her own greed and jealousy. The wedding was beautiful, filled with laughter and joy. Eleanor danced with her new husband, her heart overflowing with love. She had survived loss, poverty, and danger. She had faced down assassins and scheming noblewomen, and she had found the one man in the world who would fight for her, protect her, and love her. After the wedding, William and Eleanor traveled to a small estate in the Scottish Highlands, a place where they could be alone, away from the gossip and intrigue of London. They walked through misty glens, watched the sunset over lochs, and talked for hours about their dreams and their fears. "This is the happiest I have ever been," Eleanor said one evening, as they sat together on a hillside, the heather swaying in the breeze. "I never thought I could be happy," William replied, gazing at her with adoration. I was too wounded, too angry, too afraid. But you healed me. You made me believe that love was possible. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that." Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. She had been through so much, endured so much. But in the end, she had found her place in the world. She had found her love, and she had found her happily ever after. They stayed in Scotland for 6 months, returning to London at the end of the season. Eleanor took her place as the Marchioness of Kensington, a title that came with responsibility and expectation. But she did not fear it. She was not the same woman who had scrubbed pots and hidden from assassins. She was strong, confident, and deeply loved. And as she walked into the grand ballrooms of London, the whispers about her disappeared. She was no longer a servant. She was no longer a traitor's daughter. She was the wife of the Marquess of Kensington, the future Duchess of Ashworth, and the bravest woman anyone had ever known. She had saved a man's life, and in doing so, she had saved her own. And William, who had once been a man haunted by war and loss, became a man transformed by love. He smiled again. He laughed again. He became the man he had always wanted to be, all because a brave kitchen maid had stood before a sword to protect him.